Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners. If you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, then please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also access all of our resources for business owners just by leaving us a comment. Our host joining me today is BizSmart founder Kevin Brent. But before we start today's webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen and post any questions that you may have for Kevin, and he will answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you, Kevin. Over to you.
Thank you, Caroline. So today's webinar follows on from a couple we've done before on core values and core purpose. So this is the third one in looking at creating a powerful vision for our business, and it's a great time of year to start to look at that. So we looked at the core ideology last time, and that's our forever sort of stuff. That's the core values, the core purpose. This time around, we're going to look a little bit nearer in terms of time frame. We're going to look at something called the envisioned future, or something that Jim Collins in particular has called the envisioned future. So by now, hopefully, if you've been following the previous webinars, you've had a look at your core values and your core purpose. So you should start to be having a strong sense of purpose as a team, and you should also have tested your culture, the things that sort of define you as a team. And you should also understand why these are so important, and perhaps refer back to those webinars if you're not familiar with that. So if you've done this well, you'll probably be feeling pretty good about yourselves and feeling pretty motivated to push forwards faster than perhaps before. So now we've done that and we've looked at the forever stuff, we need to bring it a little bit closer to home and look at where we want to be in, say, 10 to 15 years' time. Now, as a reminder of what we're trying to do here, we're starting out, this is all part of the planning process, we're starting out with the long term, and then step by step we're bringing it back to the current day, to the day-to-day, and each time we're adding a little bit more detail. Obviously, the further out we look, the less detail we can put on it, the hazier it is, if you like, but the closer we get to the current time frame, the sharper we can be, and the more detail we can describe things in. So in this way, in the way of starting with the long term and then bringing it backwards, we can ensure that everything we do, every tactic that we implement, will be taking us a step closer to where we want to be in the long term. And we can also turn that vision into a plan as opposed to it just being a dream. So we're going to work backwards from our core ideology through our 10 to 15 year aim. And if you come back for some of the future webinars that we'll do, we'll also then look at setting a 3-year base camp along the way to that 10 or 15 year horizon, and then taking it back even from there to look at the next 12 months and a 12-month action plan. But we're obviously not going to do all of that in one go. So today we're going to look at the envisioned future. So first question, where do you want to be in 10 or 15 years' time? Do you have a clear idea of where you want to be? Actually, it's not so important, really, whether it's 10 years' time, 15 years' time, 20 years' time, or even 7 or 8 years' time. What is important is that you can see a point that's important to you and that it's far enough ahead that we can consider things at that point and not be too constrained with what's happening in the business today, and not be too worried about exactly what's going on now, where the next client's going to come from, but we can set ourselves where we would like the business to be at a particular point. So you may know, for example, in 12 years' time, no idea how old you are, but it might be that, let's say you're going to be 60 in 12 years' time, and you want to retire and go to the beach, sit in the sun, something like that. But that's a particular time frame, a particular aim that you have at that point. So you might also be aiming, might be something slightly different. That might not be the case. You might be thinking, actually, you know what, in 8 years' time, for whatever reason, at that point, I want to be in a position that I could sell my business for a certain amount of money. So those are two good horizons, but you will have your own horizons. So pick whatever you think that is, pick whatever you think the time frame is, but it should really certainly be further away than 5 years, and it should be less than 20 years. It should be somewhere that is sort of in that medium to long term sort of time frame. And in an ideal world, if you've got a senior management team, then you should do this exercise, just like the core values and the core purpose exercises. You should do it with your senior management team. If you haven't got a senior management team and it's maybe just you in the business, then try and find somebody that you trust, whether that be an independent advisor or whether that be a friend or a colleague that you trust and rate, that you can work with to bounce ideas off of and to help ask you some questions that might get you to think a little bit differently. So what we're after, in the words of Jim Collins, is a vivid description of what we want our business to look like at that point. We don't need to write a huge essay. Nothing that we do at BizSmart is really about writing lots and lots of words. This is so you can do it in bullet point format. It doesn't, you don't have to spend time writing it particularly. So try this as an exercise. And as I say, ideally do it with your senior team or with somebody that you rate and that you trust and can bounce ideas off of. You could do it on your own. There's nothing to stop you doing it on your own. But from experience, you're going to find that you will get much further and it'll be much richer if you've got somebody else to ask you questions and to bounce ideas off of in this case. Give yourself maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that to do a reasonable job of this. So here's the exercise. Imagine a journalist is writing an article about your business, or they've written an article. So the first question is, who does that journalist work for? Do they work for a local publication of some sort? Is it a regional, national, or even is it an international either publication or organisation that they're writing for? And that kind of will give you a little bit and an idea of the level of your ambition as to what it is that you're really trying to build. And it's perfectly fine, whatever that might be. It might be that you are aiming to become really well known in a particular local area. And that's absolutely fine, and therefore, obviously, it would be a local type publication that might be doing it. It might be a trade publication if you're in a particular industry. It might be whatever the key trade publication is, or media are for that particular industry, or it might be a general business type one, or it might even be a public newspaper type thing that's available in public domain. So that's the first thing. Who does that journalist work for? Next, imagine what they're going to put, what they're writing in that article. Think about the key bullet points. So here's some questions on the screen here, but are they writing about a specific event that's happened in your business? So we were setting that time frame. Have you, for example, either just sold the business at that point, or have you perhaps merged with somebody, or have you relocated your key premises, or have you opened your 20th branch? Whatever it might be that you think is key that they're going to be talking about. Maybe you've won some prestigious award, whether it be for something like customer service, or you've reached a milestone in terms of turnover or customer numbers, market share, or similar. So there's a number of sorts of questions here, but think of your own. It's where you want to take your business. How would somebody was describing your business at that time horizon that you've picked? What sort of things would they be writing about that you would want the business to have got to at that point? So we've got the key questions there, and give people about 10 to 15 minutes to do this. If you're working with your team, get them to do this individually rather than conferring at this point. So that way you will tease out perhaps any differences, but also ideally some common ground that you've all got. But that's where you will get that richness, and you will get a good amount of debate coming by if you let people do this individually to start with. So give them 10 or 15 minutes, much longer, and we're in danger of overthinking it at this point, much shorter, and you won't give people enough time to get some of the good points out. So you've done this individually so far, noting down what each of you think the business should strive to look like in 10 or 15 years' time. Now's the time to get out those flip charts that you've heard me talk about before, that you can stick on the wall, and get everybody's ideas up on the walls for people to see and to debate. So if you're just working on your own with this trusted advisor, then you've got it there. They can probe you about it, ask questions about it. What exactly do we mean by that? And give yourself another 15 to 45 minutes, depending on the size of your team here, to allow people to explain what they've meant by their bullet points, and capture the key things down on these flip charts, and allow yourself a little bit of time for debate on these. But depending on how much time you've set for the whole session, don't allow that to go on for too long, because otherwise you'll be there forever. So if you get caught in something that's key to the future but is not coming to a consensus, it might be because there's some more information that you need to go away and find out before you can do that. So if that's the case, if there is something really, really key that you want to be able to capture, but you can't get agreement on that meeting, then let's park that and let's go and find out whatever information it is that we need to, and let's bring it back at another point. But if there's no point in just debating it if you really need some other information. So let's go away and get that, and then come back later. So now you've done that, what we want to do is agree as a group what the top few ideas. It might be as few as 5, or it might be, say, 10, something like that. But we're not talking of 20 or 30 different bullet points. Let's pick out the key things here now that we think are really the key points, the key things that describe where we want to be at that point. And once we've got those, then we can just flesh those out a little bit more. So we can add a little bit more description to those 5 to say, okay, well, if we want to have won that award for whatever it might be, okay, what does that mean that we've got to have actually done to have won that award, and why would they have given it to us? And any of the other key things that you've talked about. Let's flesh that out just a little bit more, so that they then become, in the words of Jim Collins, a vivid description, and that they really give you a pictorial kind of in your mind. You can actually imagine what that might look like to have achieved that. So allow another 15 minutes or so to do this. Really, what you're doing here, you're not writing any new stuff here so much as actually pulling together the things from the other points that you've got. So now you should have a really good mental picture of what that future business looks like, and one that ideally the rest of your senior management team at least have bought into, they've been part of, and it's not a case of you just telling somebody this is where we're going. So hopefully they've been part of that. So just to be sure that this really is a good vivid description, let's test them against some criteria that Jim Collins has come up with here as well. And that's just like we did really with the core values and the core purpose. We had a set of questions that we used to determine whether or not this is likely to be a powerful description. So does the vivid description conjure up pictures and a mental image of what it would be like to achieve your vision? So that's that point that I mentioned. Have you used specific concrete examples and analogies to bring that vision to life rather than just bland platitudes? So can you really almost touch it and taste it? Is it really concrete examples? So not just we want to be big enough to sell, but actually, okay, so how big? How much do we want to be able to sell for? What does that mean in terms of money that might come out of the business if we were to sell that? If we were to want to sell for that, what does that mean in terms of turnover? So you've got a few more specifics in there. Is it something that expresses the passion of why you're doing things? Is this something that people can really get passionate about and believe in, rather than just, oh, well, it'd be nice to do that, but actually something that really matches with your core purpose as well, and your core values, really, ideally, that you've talked about before. So these things all link together. So that really what should happen is then this final one, when you read that vivid description, you're thinking, well, it would be great, it'd be really fantastic if we could make that happen. And hopefully you and the rest of your team are thinking, yeah, you know what, I really want to be part of that. I'm prepared to spend a lot of effort and hard work to deliver that, to get there. And it's not just something that you as the business owner want to do and the others really are just along for the ride and not really that interested in it. So now we reach the last part of doing the vision. What we need to do is set ourselves a stretch goal. So we've described now in a number of different ways, a number of these bullet points, what we'd like the business to look like. But what we want now is to give ourselves an actual goal, a target, if you like, or as Jim Collins calls it, he calls it the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And so this is not some small incremental little goal steps we want to take, by increasing sales by 10% or something. But equally, we don't want it to be something that's completely unachievable. It needs to be something that at a stretch we think we're going to be able to make. So if we put the right amount of effort into it, and that we've got the right focus, and perhaps with a bit of fair wind behind us, that we stand a 50 to 70% chance of achieving that goal within our time frame that we've set ourselves. So it's not something that we think, that would be a piece of cake. And frankly, if we just keep growing as we are, that we would make that. But equally, it's got to be something that we think, well, it's not impossible. If we got a few things right, and we really worked hard on it, and maybe with a little bit of luck on our side, there's a better than evens chance that we'd make it. So this shouldn't be too hard, because the chances are that one of your vivid descriptions, one of your bullet points of your vivid description, will effectively be a stretch goal, and certainly with a little bit of tweaking. So we're not thinking of something new here. This should almost certainly come out of one of those snippets that we've already written down. We might want to tighten up, make it a little bit more specific, and make it smart in terms of SMART goals that you would have heard of. So specific, measurable, something that actually can be actioned, that it's relevant, and that it's time bound. So you've got that on, but it almost certainly will be the way that we're going about this. If you come up with something that is completely different from what you've actually written down in your vivid description bullet points, then you probably didn't go through the thinking of the vivid description enough, and you might want to go back and just make sure that that's included within there. And your stretch goal should also link back in some way to your core purpose. So you can start to see how all these things really are tying in together. They're not done in isolation. So let's maybe give you a few examples, because a stretch goal can be, there are different types of stretch goal. And they're all equally valid. They don't all have to be about numbers. They can, of course, be financially based. So it can be very qualitative, like this one here, become a £1 million business with 20% net profits by year 10. But they can also be competitive or aspirational. So, for example, here we got be seen as the Rolls Royce of the catering equipment industry in the UK. So that's very much more of an aspirational type one. It could be that we're going to build a business that could be sold for, say, £5 million in year 10. Might be, let's take a 10% market share from our leading competitor, which is obviously a much more competitive type stretch goal. You might want to be seen as the number one or the number two in our key market sector. So that it's a more aspirational, slightly competitive sort of type one in there. So your stretch goal, you don't have to think that it's all about turnover numbers or profit numbers. It can be much more market share based, competitive based, or just simply we want to be seen as the best, the number one. But don't forget, when we'll come to test again, it won't surprise you to know that there's some criteria questions to help us assess whether it's a good stretch goal or not. You're going to want, one of those will be that you'll be able to know when you've got there. So if you just say we want to be the best at something, you're going to need to have in your own mind, how are you actually going to show that you are the best at something? What does that mean? So here we are. Here are those tests that I was talking about. So first one, do you find this stretch goal exciting? It's no good if it's just a boring thing. Again, you've got to bought into it that it's something you really want to achieve. Is it clear? Nice and simple, compelling, and it's easy to understand, because you're going to want other people within the organisation to understand this. Does the stretch goal somehow link back to the core purpose? Will the stretch goal be exciting to a broad base of people within the business, not just your senior team? Because if you're going to stand any chance of really achieving this, you're going to want to communicate this to the rest of the team, and you're going to want them to buy into it. Is it undeniably a stretch goal and not just some mumbo jumbo group of words that sounds lovely on paper but really isn't that great? Do you believe that you've got that 50 to 70% chance, or better than even the chance of achieving it, if everybody's fully committed to it and everything goes well? Will achieving that stretch goal require some sort of step change in what you're doing, rather than just simply be growing organically as we've grown before, so it's not just a case of let's just do 5 or 10% increase year on year. And that last one, at that point, whether it's 10 or 15 years or whether it's 8 or whatever that time horizon is, will you be able to tell if you have achieved that stretch goal? So if you can answer yes to all of those questions, then you've certainly got yourself a really good, strong stretch goal. If the answer is maybe or even no to some of those, then you might want to just maybe think about going back to it a little bit more and just seeing what you need to do to really strengthen that. So that's the vivid description and the stretch goal. What we normally do when we're working with clients at this point is we summarize what we've done so far, which is the core ideology and the vision future. We just summarize it in a little PowerPoint slide, something like this. This is more of an internal document just so you've got it summarized. You may well want to use this in different ways to publicize in the business, but this is just for the moment, just to make sure we've captured things, because up to now we've probably got them all just scribbled on flip charts. So we're now just putting the core things here and getting them into a one-page little summary here. So just a little summary table with core ideology on one side and vision future on the other. And that then really gets us to the end of this section. We've now got ourselves what should be a really powerful vision. We understand our core culture, our ideology, we know our values, our core purpose, and we've envisioned where we want to be in 10 or 15 years' time, and we've given a reasonable description of how that business looks at that point. Now, of course, we've got to put a plan together to make that happen, because it's all very well just saying that's where we want it to be, but that's not going to happen without a plan. So now what we're going to look at is, in future webinars, is starting to look at focusing on the right things and setting ourselves that 3-year base camp that I talked about. That is that base camp at 3-year point on the way to our stretch goal, with an action plan then to help us to ensure that we do continue onwards and upwards towards that stretch goal. And that's what we're going to look at in my next webinar. Thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Kevin. Let's see if there are a few questions coming in for you. Yeah, the first one is from Paula, and she asks, you refer to core values and core purpose. How do I find these?
Oh, the previous webinars on those. So they're all on our YouTube channel. So if you go onto YouTube and you search for BizSmart, you should find our YouTube channel. And then if you search within there for core values, core purpose, you should find the recordings of the previous webinars on those topics.
Okay, thank you very much. And your next question is from Simon. How do I make sure the rest of my organisation buy into this envision future? Okay,
so we've hopefully got our senior management team. If we're now talking about an organisation that's got a layer of senior managers, and then it's got the rest of the organisation, and hopefully the senior managers have been involved within creating the envision future anyway. So now we've got to find a way to disseminate that, if you like, and get the rest of the people within the organisation to buy into it. And there are a number of ways that we can do that. The first is to think about how we can actually communicate that summary document that I've talked about, and it might be that you do have a company get together, if you like. You get everybody in the same room, depending on how big you are, but you take people through it, and you get maybe some of your senior managers to present it, rather than necessarily just being you telling everybody what it should be. Maybe you get senior managers to do it. So the first thing, that's certainly something that you can do. There is also a tool that we use to help people think about that in everything that they do and apply it to their roles, and it's something called the Smart Vision, the one-page Smart Vision. And again, if you go onto our YouTube channel, you'll find a webinar where I've talked about that, and that's a really useful tool that allows, on a quarterly basis, really, people to start thinking about how the company core culture translates to this quarter and this month's actions for me as an individual. And it is a really powerful tool. It requires you as an organisation to get used to using this sort of thing, but it is something to get started. And it's all part of It's all part of having the right kind of meeting rhythm, the right communication within the business. And there's a separate webinar on that called it's called the meeting rhythm, I think, or the lifeblood of your business, the meeting rhythm. And those two things go together really well to help to communicate those values throughout the organisation. So there's a couple of starters for that.
Perfect. Thank you again, Kevin, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of the presentation and Kevin's contact details out to you all very shortly. So please do email him direct if you have any further questions. Just before we close, just a quick reminder, if you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, then please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also access all of our resources for business owners by just leaving us a comment. This is the end of today's BizSmart webinar. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you can join us again very soon.
Super, thank you.